Today's guest is the author of 6 non-fiction books. The 2 most recent are The Spiritual Entrepreneur and Joy at Work. He was a director of a not-for-profit spiritual organization called Alternatives, based in St. James Church, Piccadilly, London, for 13 years. Subsequently, he began his own healing and awakening work. He has created a healing system called SoulMatrix Healing for Starseeds. He has created a library of free sources, including meditations and transmissions to help starseeds, which are freely available on his website and YouTube channel. These meditations and transmissions are played all over the world, and so far the platform has over 177,000 subscribers. He regularly runs events in the UK and overseas. Let's welcome today's guest, Steve Nobel. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Adam.
Yep. Well, for myself, being on the path of being a school teacher and then finding my way through the rabbit hole of increasing my level of consciousness and raising my level of vibration, meeting different healers, and I was introduced to your particular, the program you have, which is the Starseed Business Networking, which I guess gets people together to share their talents, their healing modalities with a group of like-minded people. And I guess we can call those people Starseeds, which is very interesting. Maybe you could just share with the audience a little bit about your background of how you came on this path of working in the nonprofit organization to doing the great work that you do now.
Yeah, I always say it started in the birth canal. I popped out into this working class family in London and kind of a magical child. And then in my teenage years, got a bit shut down really by my family. They could tolerate it earlier on, but couldn't tolerate it as a teenager. I was getting into Buddhism, microbiotics, yoga, everything to freak out your parents at that time. My parents were products of the kind of World War II. They were evacuated in the Blitz and all that. So they grew up through all that difficulty. So here I'm doing all this weird stuff and I couldn't really compute. I really explored a lot in my teenage years. And then I decided to go normal. I got a normal job. 10 years in banking, 10 years local government. And then had a little bit of a kind of wall crashed. And then my father passed away in 1991. That kind of seemed to liberate me from the spell of had to be normal. And then I started exploring again and finding all the things that I previously was looking for but couldn't find. And synchronicity was happening, which I never had a word for before. But, you know, one thing was leading to another, a bit like the Hansel and Gretel trail of pebbles in the forest type of thing. Right. And it seemed that some higher intelligence was guiding me, which was amazing. Like I felt it. And within 6 months, I was led to all the major teachers, channels, organizations, which will be important to me for the next 20 years. So I started volunteering for this spiritual organization in 94, I think it was. It might be 95. And eventually became a director of it. It was hosting all these spiritual authors. A lot of American authors came over, actually. Some of the big names, probably a lot of your listeners would know, the Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle, Neil Donald Walsh, Julia Cameron's, Byron Katie. These type of people come over. So it's really lovely to host them and meet them, which was really lovely to see how they were personally as well as on stage. Right. Marianne Williamson, there's probably a load of people your audience will be familiar with. Around 2010, I started getting the call to leave, but I resisted it. And eventually I was really pulled out. I resigned. I left in winter solstice 2012 and went into a dark night for 6 years and then emerged one morning. And in that 6 years, I had no guidance, no connecting. That all had gone, which was very difficult. And then I woke up one morning and a voice said, start teaching about Starseeds and Ascension. And I was like, it wasn't really the voice I wanted to hear. It wasn't really the welcoming. Oh, finally, you're out. Come on. You know, it was like, now, okay, you've had 6 years in the darkness, get on with it. And it was a bit like that. And I meditated for 2 weeks thinking, do I really want to do this? It wasn't something that I was feeling it was my natural next step. What do I know about starseeds and ascension? But I decided after 2 weeks of meditating to just say yes to it. And a bit like Jim Carrey, the Yes Man. I don't know if you've seen that film. Just
Yes,
say
yes.
yes to anything spirit asks you. So that's been my approach, really. If I get the impulse to do something, even if it feels strange to my mind, I'll say yes to it, including all these transmissions that I was getting from spirit. In the early days, I was very hesitant about putting out meditations of goddesses, particularly. But then I decided, you know what, I'll just say yes to it. So it's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle following the path of transmissions and then where's next. And they were kind of guiding me, but they weren't giving me a lot of specifics. They were kind of often saying, Spirit was saying, it'll work out, those kind of very vague terms, which frustrating. I want to know specifically, what do I do next? And sometimes the specific step would come and gradually the path formed. So for the last several years, I've been doing this SoulMatrix. And in the beginning, I thought I was winging it, but now I feel I've got a much better idea about the whole process, what's going on planet Earth at the moment.
Yeah, on that level, in terms of many people experiencing, I guess, ascension symptoms and expansion, people go through the dark night of the soul, but they also go through I would guess I'd call it imposter syndrome, the feeling that they don't exactly resonate, or they don't actually feel that they deserve or belong to be doing what they're doing. So
Yeah.
what was the turning point for you that you started to believe in what you were doing, as opposed to questioning it?
Well, I think even early on in the path, I had the question in my mind, is this for real? Is this path for real? Yes, it seems to be working out, but is it for real? And so in the early days, I was testing the universe a lot, in terms of manifesting and healing and all kinds of things. An example would be in London, there's a zone where parking, if you park there at a certain time, you just get towed away. So I decided really in my naivety, you know what, I'm just going to park there, go and see a film, make my car filled with light, and when I come back, it's going to be fine. And I did that, and the car was fine. And I did a number of those things, really pushing the boat to test, is this real? And then finally, I got a message one morning from a voice saying, "Okay, stop pushing the boat. You've got what you need now, and let's get on with it."
Right.
And I think the same with this path. In the beginning, it was like um, I was doing workshops in the beginning, and lots of people were turning up and then going away, really, zipping along and going. And I was wondering, am I really giving them value? Am I really giving them what they need? And the person who was promoting me at the time saying, these people are loving it, keep going. So I was like, well, okay. So I think with something like imposter syndrome, which everyone has, we all have it.
Right.
I sometimes sit there going, what after 20 years of doing a normal job, should I be doing this kind of stuff?
Right.
And I actually chatted to my partner the other day. She put a post on imposter syndrome herself on YouTube. And I said, if my father was here, he would say, this is not a real job you're doing. This is, yeah, you're
Yes.
getting some money, but it's not a real job. Get a normal job or a proper job. He would say, like
Right.
a
Right.
proper
Right.
job. He
Wow.
worked in printing and, proper job, which is like, it's tangible. You can hold it. You can feel it. It's not all this woo woo, stuff, writing books. Okay. Well, a book is okay. But yeah, I think he'd be shaking his head even today if he saw me.
Yeah. Interesting. We wind up facing we wind up, as I mentioned, the personal struggle often begins within ourselves, of first understanding where we're headed and what we're doing. But then we face adversity on the outside world, from family members, relationships, and many times when we're on the path to awakening, um, many of the relationships we have, marriages, friendships, they sort of go sour, um, based upon one person rising above the other person's frequency, or vice versa. Maybe you could share a little bit about any information or insight you have into this.
Yeah. Well, one person I would love to have met but never did meet was Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey. And on that journey, one of the aspects of it that I really picked up was that resistance is normal, or refusing the journey is normal. You could say refusing the journey, but I would say resisting the journey. that our ego mind, we start waking up, and our ego mind, which is kind of connected to the old world, goes, I don't understand this journey. I don't trust it. We ain't going there. So part of us wants to go there, and another part of us goes, we don't know what that journey is, and we're not going there. And so the ego, all these aspects of ourselves, the ego is not one thing, it's many bits of ourselves. It's like a gestalt of vulnerable and powerful and protective and all of these kind of things. The ego may seem to sabotage our journey, trip us up, or block us, or begin to, or it aligns with another part of ourselves, the inner critic. It just starts, what the hell are you doing in this journey? And we get these kind of voices going on. So this inner dynamic starts, especially at the beginning of the journey, which is like a tussle, a kind of conflict between the soul light or the higher self coming in and the ego going, we don't like this. It's a bit like the tussle I imagine the caterpillar goes through when it starts getting the impulse to turn into a butterfly. It probably has got no idea what's happening and probably resists. And I think I read somewhere that the butterfly cells, whatever's released, starts to overwhelm the caterpillar that thinks it's a kind of being attacked. There's a kind of, the immune system of the caterpillar thinks it's being attacked, and eventually the immune system gets overwhelmed, and then the butterfly eventually happens. And I think that's what happens, is that the ego's defenses eventually get a bit overwhelmed, and the ego learns to chill a bit and relax a bit. The first spiritual group I went into, everyone was sitting in a circle holding a talking stick, speaking from their heart. It frightened the life out of me, thinking, where am I and what am I doing here?
Right.
But eventually, after doing several of those circles, I could relax, going, it's okay. It's just someone coming around and talking. It's fine. You're safe. So this aspect of safety, which is very primal for the ego, has to be met. This is safe. This is not a dangerous path. Then it relaxes. And that resistance is particularly amped up if we've had other lifetime challenges in terms of shining our light or speaking our truth. And if you think of the last few thousand years, if you stood on a soapbox and said, hey, the soul's light is with me, I'm waking up, you'd be held before the courts and burned as a witch. And maybe, some of us were. I mean, I've got a memory of that, of early on in the mid-90s, I had a memory of being burnt as a witch. Is terrifying.
Yeah.
The whole experience of just remembering it was terrifying. So the unconscious mind, which is connected to our ego, remembers these things and starts thinking it's a bit worrying that you're thinking of doing this again, or if you've been proclaimed a heretic, or the king didn't like you, or you were banished, all of these, or imprisoned or tortured, all of these things create resistance in the unconscious, and the ego itself has its resistance. So this is the path of awakening. We wake up, light comes into our field, our mind, but parts of us resist it. So it's this light dark battle. Eventually the light begins to infuse the darkness, the ego begins to relax a bit, begins to maybe even become an ally a bit. And there's also, as you mentioned, I think, external adversity where our mother doesn't like it, or our wife doesn't like it, or these people don't like it, they don't trust, and they might tell you, we don't like it, we're worried about you. What kind of, my ex-wife used to say to me, what cult are you in now? She used to say it regularly to me. So there's all this kind of thing going. So there's an internal battle, an external thing, and the two are reflecting each other. This internal fight is reflected outside by people blocking our path or worrying about us or doubting us. So as the inner battle begins to recede, the outer also begins to relax. The people my ex-wife, who was very, very resistant, now puts orders in for crystals when I go off to certain spiritual sites. She says, will you get me some crystal necklaces or bracelets or something?
Yeah.
And, even my grandchildren are putting in orders for crystals these days. So now, before they're all very against it, now they're all putting in their orders for it. So that is a kind of relaxing of the external world. The inner reflects the outer, really. And as you mentioned, relationships get shaken up quite a lot. And I think, as you also mentioned, it's a vibrational thing, because as the awakening process starts to shift our vibration, anyone we're connected to doesn't like it, who wants to keep you down, you're starting to rise out of their orbit, and they realize that you're going to leave them because vibrationally you're not matching anymore. And so they don't like it, and they will try and pull you back down, maybe through drama, maybe through arguing, maybe through blocking you, whatever. and it doesn't work. And so eventually it breaks. The only way a relationship will stay is if they also decide, you know what, I'm joining you on the path. But, you know, that would be great if they did do that. But it
Yes, yes.
often is the case they won't do that.
Well, sometimes
So, yeah.
I find that the friction of that type of encounter actually is the impetus to, I guess, push one through, so to speak, like the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. Without that friction or tension, I don't think some of our souls would then shift into that level that it needs to have. So, in one end, it's probably a positive thing to have people come our way who we have these negative encounters with, but eventually, we're able to reflect or to see what we need, how we have to navigate. I interview a lot of people who have near-death experiences, and as you speak about the subject of person who doesn't have a near-death experience, they find their own spiritual awakening through their own past life, probably recalls, or again, the people who come in to cause this friction. The people who have near-death experiences are on a completely different path than what they're supposed to be doing from my experience, and then something happens, obviously, which shakes them to surrender to their calling when they come back. And I'm sure you've dealt with people or had that experience. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, well, I think in terms of challenges, it reminds, well, there's a few things. The oyster and the grit, you know, it's the oyster is created through the grit in
Right,
the
right.
pearl is created through the grit in the oyster. And the universe is it's not that the spiritual path is devoid of challenges, because that's not true. In fact, it seems that it gets more intense. I don't know if that's your experience, Adam, but it can intensify in some ways. You know, some spiritual teachers talk about going through the fire. I've read a number of teachers talking about this, the fire to burn away what they might say the impurities of the ego, that there's a kind of idea of being tested in the fire.
Yeah.
Um, there's another metaphor, which is like walking the razor's edge. You know, the spiritual path get very narrow, and you have to be very mindful as you go along it. So there's a metaphor of the pearl and the grit going through the fire, and there's this razor's edge. None of them is particularly like what a lot of teachers will say initially. You know, the path is magical, but it also contains these elements. And it's not something that most people realize when they go down, you know, if they go to a mind, body, spirit expo or something, and you see all those lovely crystal stands or meditation stands, the promise is your life will get easier, which it does, and it does get more magical, but it can also intensify the challenges. But the challenges are there, I believe, to activate your inner resources. And those resources are not just from this lifetime. They're multidimensional. They come from many lifetimes, because the soul is multidimensional. We just don't live just one lifetime. So things start activating within us that we didn't realize were there. And one essential quality that I think every person on the path has to activate, which is why challenges will kind of pummel us a bit, is courage, the energy of courage. Because, you know, it's conformity. I'll just put up with things. I'll just keep going. I'll bite my lip, you know, and all of this kind of thing. It just doesn't work. So we get hit a few times to activate this courage. You know what? I'm not putting up with this anymore. I'm going to shift my life. I'm not quite sure where it's going, or I do know where it's going, and I'm going to go there, and I'm going to resign from that path. Sometimes we need to be hit a few times to actually make us get resolved to do that. I mean, I've had a number of clients in the corporate world whose life gets much more intense, the anal boss, in more intense deadlines, that basically forces the pressure begins to force them to follow their heart. You
Yeah.
know, if the job was really easy, then they would never do it. You know, and so it's that being forced to follow your heart, forced to follow your truth. That squeezing, or the fire, or the grit in the oyster, forces us to we get to ask the question, you know, who am I? Why am I here? What am I really about? Where am I really wanting to go? How do I want to serve the world? These kind of questions. And it's really these challenges you're talking about that really produce those kind of questions.
Yeah, which brings us back to the subject of the soul and listening to that inner voice, which many times people block out or numb themselves up with different aspects of not being able to feel what they're supposed to feel, or feel what you're discussing. You speak about the ascension. For people who aren't familiar with the term ascension, which, for example, if I'm speaking to certain people and I tell them ascension symptoms, they look at me with, with big eyes and say, what exactly is that? And to describe it to a person would, I guess, seem a little out of the ordinary for a person who's not on this path. But there are people who are evolving. So maybe you could just uh, give us a little definition in your opinion of what ascension is.
Ascension, in the way I understand it, would be um, well, I kind of, if you think of the world we see out there, a bit like the film The Matrix, isn't it? This is the world you see. It's what we think is normal. It's what I might say is the 3D world, a kind of third density world, where there's a lot of opposition, there's a lot of striving, there's a lot of finger pointing. It's the world you read in the newspapers or see on the news, that kind of world. It's a bit competitive. It's a bit dog eat dog. It's a bit, it's a tough world, really, in some ways. When we start waking up, we start to leave the 3D world. And in the 3D world, rocks are hard, water's wet, basically. But in the 4D world, we start waking up to the idea of the eternity of the soul. We start waking up to the idea of everything is energy. We start waking up to the idea of I've lived many lifetimes, I've had other lifetimes, and I will again. We start waking up to all of this kind of stuff. I create my reality, these kind of spiritual ideas from the inside out. And we start playing around with them. We start exploring them. We start exploring crystal healing and all kinds of healing and Reiki and these kind of mantras and vision boarding and rituals and all of this stuff. Suddenly a new world opens up of exploration, and you can explore. I've explored many things in that world. I've had Reiki attunements, Seikem attunements. I've been on witchcraft retreats. I've been on metaphysical retreats, healing retreats, everything. We all explore, don't we? We go through this exploration. 5D is where the whole journey gets a lot more serious. It's where we start to realize about the ascension process. We start to think in terms of, things like starseeds, which might be a bit way out there in the 4D. And really, 4D is about how can I make my life better. Whereas 5D is what's going on in the world? What's happening to the world? What's happening to me? What's happening to me? I feel different and my life is different. And in 5D, everything is about vibration, and it's about stabilizing in a high vibration, not letting the world pull you down. Because when, the law of resonance is when two people meet, then they try to harmonize, which means one will come down and one might come up a bit. So 5D is, what? I'm not coming down. You can come up, but I ain't coming down.
Right.
And that's kind of, no matter where you are, what the situation, what the people are, 5D is stabilizing what some people might call Christ consciousness or Buddhic nature, or it's a very, very high vibrational place where you start to affect the world around you. The world doesn't affect you as much. You are affecting the world. It's a bit like going into a room and your vibration shifts things. People may have a kind of cathartic experience just in your presence. Even if you're doing a healing, you might not do anything. They might start having a cathartic thing. It's all vibrational, really. So we're going from 3D to 4D to 5D. Ascension, the term ascension has been really, most people think of it as a Christian term, the ascension of Christ.
Right.
And the coming again of Christ. These kind of, if you do a Google, what is ascension, you get a lot of Christian stuff coming up. So ascension is really, the world is ascending. It's not just people are ascending. The world is shifting in vibration. Human resonance is shifting. The world is shifting. The human collective is shifting very slowly, but there is a group of people who are shifting very fast. Starseeds, light workers, they're shifting very, very fast. And they're having a big impact on the human collective. And which is why they're here, really. It's to help shift things. For me, the planet and the human collective is heading for a very different world. The world we've got now of war, of competition, of corruption, all of the terrible things we read on the news. I think about another 40 to 50 years, we'll see a completely transformed world. It is taking time. But personally, we can shift very quickly personally, but the world probably takes about 100 years to really, because it's a lot of density to shift in the whole planet and human collective, really. If you think it's been thousands of years of heavy energies going on, darkness and war. So
Yeah, you hear the word starseed, which you mentioned. As I've traveled up this path, encountered different people who say, I recognize you from this planet. I recognize you from that planet. And you come into contact with people who have this insight into this feeling of knowing, or this feeling of missing something, or the earth not being home, or yearning to go back home. And as a star seed, the term itself, it's a very interesting concept to relate to people on a deeper, more subconscious level, a connection that doesn't exist between the normal friendship of neighbor to neighbor. As we speak of the word starseed, there's a 10-strand activation regarding that. Maybe you can discuss that a little bit.
What did you say? Something activation?
Yeah, the 10 strands activation.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. There's a number of people, and I do believe also myself that with the awakening process, there's the vibrational shift. There's a shift in the chakra system, because humanity is primarily running on the base, sacral, and solar plexus, third density, which is about survival, sexuality, emotional responses, and power, ego. The three lower ones. The shift is upwards to the heart, which is kind of fourth density, to the throat, which is fifth density, and further up, and on and on and on. As we shift and awaken the chakra system up, what happens is the DNA in the cells, at the moment we're a two-stranded race, DNA two strands in the core of the cells. And there's a lot of what scientists call junk DNA. And I heard one channel describe it like this. Imagine going into a library and most of the shelves all the books on the shelves have been thrown in a huge pile in the middle, but there's a few shelves just with the books there. And the rest is piled in the middle. All that jumbled up books is called junk DNA. And then you've got the three shelves of the three chakras, which relate to the two strands of DNA. So I think under a microscope, you might see a two-stranded DNA. I think that's what people see. The awakening happens at the etheric level. There's an etheric, energetic awakening of up to 12 strands of DNA in the cells. Some people say there's more, but I think 12 is what I can see. 12-stranded DNA. I can't remember if scientists have actually seen a third strand physically in a living being yet. I think they might have done, where the thing is, we awaken it energetically and eventually it becomes physical. Those strands will eventually become physical. As they become physical, well, energetic and physical, it starts to awaken gifts in us, gifts of vision, gifts of telepathy, gifts of higher powers, really, that gifts of just sensing energy. That gifts of intuition. So an example would be, I studied martial arts for many years, very intensely when I was a teenager. And then I gave it up. And then I went back to it in my early 40s after doing a lot of spiritual practice. When I went in the karate ring in this tournament, I won 2 gold medals because basically what I'd done was, it's not that I'd trained a lot more because I went back to it. I was just training 1 day a week, but I'd awakened the sensing of energy. So I knew before the person moved what they were going to do. And so I counted before they moved.
Wow.
And I remembered a lot of people in my club looking at me going, what's happening with this guy? I just kind of cleared the way through all these people and just won these 2 gold medals, Southeast England karate championship. And that was, I couldn't tell them what I was doing. I just couldn't explain it to them. A lot of the old martial artists would understand energy, hara, point of gravity, sensing energy, but most schools these days don't teach it. I had to go off and do a lot of spiritual work to come back to it. And I also did a bit of fencing as well. It was really interesting to see the results of the inner work and the energy work I was doing in an actual ring with an opponent, seeing, hey, there's a difference, something different is happening, So, and there's beginning to be an understanding, even in the sports world, of these things. There's the brilliant book by Timothy Galway, The Inner Game of Tennis. And the inner game of tennis, I think, was the first one, where he's really applying consciousness to sport. And that was a revolution. So we are seeing as we wake up, there are tangible things that change in our lives, gifts which we can use, which change, you know, which we can actually use. So when I was a director of that spiritual organization, I didn't, when I was became the director, I didn't actually know, I didn't have all the skills to manage an organization. But one thing I did know was how to channel and ask for help from spirit. And they gave me all the steps, and I applied the steps, and the organization came out of financial difficulty within about 18 months. And when I left the organization, it was in a very, very good place financially, and morale was very high and all these things. So it's very good to see the tangible feedback of when things awaken within us. So yeah, so yeah, Ascension starts waking us up. When I look back and think, when I was working in the bank, if someone had said to me, "You'll be doing interviews, you'll be doing coaching, you'll be doing running courses," I would have said, "You're crazy."
Yeah.
But on the path, gradually, you know, it's all opening up. I'm just following it.
Very
Really.
interesting. Very interesting. Hindsight is 2020. Looking back, probably there's like a certain point where you say, "I am doing this work. I am invested in what my my soul's purpose is." You've created a healing system called the SoulMatrix Healing for Starseeds. Um, Maybe you can share a little bit about what this is and how it assists people.
I think, like yourself, I've trained in many, many approaches. And when I first got the message, start doing sessions, my response was, "Doing what?" And the response back was, "You'll know." I'm like, "Well, you know, not very specific." Okay, thank you. All right, all right. So when I meditated on it, what I decided to do was look at everything I'd done and pull out all of the bits which had really worked, and I found I could apply. And then I started putting them into a system. Um, and basically, the system divides kind of roughly into two. So there's all the energy work and psychic surgery work and light body work and galactic work and all of that on the one side. But on the other side was all the coaching work and all the NLP and all of the kind of more hypnosis side, which I knew worked very well. And I thought, well, you got these two sides, and how do they come together?
Right.
And bit by bit, it's a bit like seeing a jigsaw in the mind. That connects there, that connects there. And so gradually over time, they've started connecting. And one of the interesting things I found with this is that different healing systems have different, almost like guardians, energy guardians. And those energy guardians like to keep the purity of a system. They don't like people like me tinkering. They don't like people like me coming along going, "Well, I'm going to take that and merge it somewhere else." And so I've had a lot of conversations with these guardians around, asking for permission and letting them know that it is okay, that it's going to be used with integrity, etc. And, some systems are more resistant than others, I found. So I trained in theta healing, just to give you an example. Theta healing many years ago, the guardians of that system didn't like very much me me looking at it and using it. I trained in another system called spiritual response therapy. That system was much more okay with me going in and using a bit. And I still very much like that system, spiritual response therapy. Robert Detzler, an American guy, genius, working with pendulums and charts. So I work a lot with pendulums, charts, because I like to ask higher self, what's the percentage of the heart chakra? How open is it? 80%, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, is there a problem there I need to clear? Is there an agreement here I need to clear? So I use pendulums because it saves a lot of time. Rather than meditating and trying to get impulse, I just ask, and I can ask, 30 questions in like 2 minutes, and get the answers really quickly and find where's the core of this. Because I don't feel I have a lot of time to get to the core of something, because a client may be, talking about one issue, but the actual core of it is somewhere else, and you have to go and find where's the core of it. So I use this system for clearing agreements, cording psychic cords between you and another person, portals or openings in the energy field need to be closed, checking the chakra system, checking the aura system, the layers of the aura, checking the bloodlines, any issues with the bloodlines. Past lovers is often can be a problem as well, you know,
Chords.
uh, because if you there's a couple of areas where you can hit problems, bloodline areas, because you've got the connection of blood. So if you've got a relative or a sibling or a parent who's really difficult, that difficulty is amplified because you've got a blood connection. If you've got a past lover, the difficulty could be amplified if they're difficult because you've had the connection, the intimacy. So blood and sex are two areas which really open problems. And the other area, the main area, is if you've worked magically with another person in another lifetime, if you've done magic rituals or tantra, tantra is another area that opens you up. These open you up to, you know, it's almost like your energy field can open up to them. That has to be really cleared and closed. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if it's a standard bog standard, you know, challenging parent, that can be okay. But if you've had 3 or 4 lifetimes with that parent, that needs to be looked at and cleared as well. You know.
Yeah, all interesting.
That's a quick surface view.
Yeah, I understand that. I work with pendulums myself, so I understand that concept of cutting and dowsing the for answers. You've written 6 nonfiction books, but the 2 most recent are The Spiritual Entrepreneur and the A Joy at Work. Maybe you'd like to discuss a little bit about those.
Well, I've got there's that one's to hand, Spiritual Entrepreneur. This one is really because as a director of that spiritual organization for 13 years, I got to a lot of the practicalities of running a business, you know, marketing, branding, all of that, as well as the energetics of running a business and doing this, which I've done this now for several years. Also, again, I've had to learn because being a director of an organization is one thing, being an entrepreneur is slightly different because now I'm the one totally responsible for everything. You know, I'm the jack of all trades doing this. So it's really practical and energetic, this book. If you're thinking of starting a business, it's probably a good idea. If you've got one and you want to really look at it and step up, then this book is good. Joy at Work is really if you're in the kind of regular world of work and you want to apply some spiritual principles to that world of work and really make the world of work a bit more graceful, easier. You know, maybe you want to make shifts in the work you're doing, then that book is probably a good one for you. You're not really ready for your own business. So there's kind of someone who's ready for their own business or has it, and the other one, they're in the regular line of work and they want to introduce a lot of beginner's mind, mindfulness, a lot of spiritual principles to really kind of shift their mindset, make things a bit easier, really.
Yeah.
Because either we shift our mindset or we shift our work. They're the 2 ways work will change. There's no, you know, either we change, if that doesn't work, the work is still difficult, then the work has to change.
Very inspiring. Your YouTube channel,
Yeah.
the meditations and transmissions have a big following with over 177,000 subscribers. It's not an easy task to access or to, you know, draw many people into YouTube itself, but the work that you do is very very inspiring. How would you describe your YouTube meditations on YouTube itself?
Cosmic, galactic. There's a lot of galactic ones, Pleiadian, Arcturian, Syrian, and Andromedan. And there was a Lyran one. I had to remove it for various reasons, but it's on my website. But I'm going to be doing another Lyran one soon. I'm going to be doing I think one of the next ones I'm going to be doing is an Arcturian trauma release, because trauma is such a problem. So basically, I'm trying to address every single problem or challenge that a starseed will encounter and give them something to remedy it, as well as every kind of desire they may have to connect. That then there'll be a transmission to help them connect to where they want to go. So either there's a challenge they want to overcome, or there's somewhere they want to go, somehow they want to connect or take the next step on the path. And so there's a transmission for that. Some of them are very practical, like emotional healing, dealing with anger, for example, or fear, those kind of ones. And the other ones are very galactic, connecting with your galactic brothers and sisters, or galactic family, I should say, these days. There's a whole range of higher light decrees, which are statements which I speak to the person listening, which are then almost like sent through them to the universe, statements of intent. I don't like the word commanding the universe, because I don't believe in the word commanding, but it's really saying to the universe, do this for me.
Yeah.
I think when somebody who wants to command the universe is really, we don't need to command the universe. We just need to say to the universe, please do this for me. Do it, as an equal. I am one with you, and I want you to do this for me, and shift it and expect it to happen. So there's the most recent ones are higher light decrees for the chakras base, or Earth Star base, all the way up to the heart and throat. I'm going to do third eye and crown when I get time. And there are all kinds of ones about clearing the education system, clearing bloodlines, clearing royal bloodlines, which can be difficult as well. Black magic, which is a problem for a lot of people. Even though we might think black magic is something in the developing world, actually, a lot of clients I see in the developed world are having problems with black magic. And fortunately, most of the problems they are having are not so serious. If you're dealing with professional black magicians, which are slightly rare in the Western world, then then that's a problem, really. But in the developing world, there are a lot of, I would say, professional shamanic black magic practitioners who do it for a living, and they can be more challenging, really. So there's that. I've done an affirmations tracks, which are affirmations of all kinds, addressing everything from abundance to, actually, abundance is another big area. Abundance, psychic protection is another big area. So I've tried to address health is another big area, all these main areas, and try and give some resources for Starseeds to meet every eventuality that they might meet. I mean, I haven't done it yet. I've got nearly 500 videos out there, but I haven't met every single eventuality. I'm still doing it. It's a growing library of resources, really.
Yeah. If you were to meet someone, or someone to ask you off the street, let's say a family member, what do I need to do to follow this path? Like, what would be your general, simple advice to them of how to awaken, or to continue on?
There's a lot of, I mean, when I started, there wasn't that much around, really, in the 90s. It was kind of, but now there's so much choice around. There's some very, very good teachers and channels out there, some very good websites out there. Cryon is another channel that gives a lot of free material. He used to, I think he still does. Kryon. And there's a channel who's no longer with us, Seth. Now you can get the Seth books, channeled by Jane Roberts, on Amazon, and I recommend Seth Speaks: The Nature of Personal Reality. Brilliant books, and they'll blow your mind. And there's some great people out there, great authors out there. The choice, it's the choice, choosing the ones which are right. There's so much choice now. It's a bit of a marketplace. You can come to my website. There's a load of resources. My YouTube channel. But there are lots of other, and I interview people as well. That you'll find links to other people I've interviewed. On my newsletter, I sometimes recommend people. I've got a Telegram channel that people can find me on, and so I'm always trying to connect people up, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, YouTube. Type in. Is there anybody else on YouTube? I'm just trying to think. Yeah, nobody jumps to mind at the moment, really. There were some other channels that I really like following. Actually, Sanaya Roman, Sanaya, and then Roman, as in the word Roman, but I think she says Roman. She's written some brilliant channel books: Living with Joy, Creating Money, Personal Awareness, I think it's called. She's got some great books, and there's some great starters if you're new to the process.
Okay, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, where could they do that?
The SoulMatrix.com, or on YouTube, search for Steve Nobel, and you'll find me. I've got about 180,000 followers now, and I'm on Instagram, Steve Nobel 101, and I'm on Facebook. You'll find me under my name, Steve Nobel. I'm even on LinkedIn. got about 12,000 followers on corporate LinkedIn, amazingly. Even in corporate world, they seem to want a bit of spiritual.
That's
And
interesting.
I still think I must be a bit out there for them, but apparently not.
No, yeah.
They seem to like me.
Well, if you could leave the audience with one message, what would you leave them with?
So the one message, the world is shifting and changing. We are entering a new age of light. We're on the beginning, the dawning of that new age of light, which is why all this so much spiritual stuff around now. But there's still the world itself is still being gripped by, old forces, dark forces. You can see in America, in the politics in America, and all the stuff about deep state and all of this. So all of those old energies are on the way out. They're going to take time to leave, but old systems that are crumbling. Don't worry about the world. The world is shifting into a new age of light. There is no Armageddon. There is no world destruction. There is a lot of difficulties. A lot of systems will change and shift and collapse. But as long as you awaken and you're guided, you feel your guidance, you'll be guided where to move to, where to go to, what to do next, and you'll be okay. So the important thing is to activate your own internal GPS and know where to go. For example, before COVID happened, I was guided, get out, get out of London. And I was guided, get everything online. So I was already guided, prepared. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was prepared for it. So when COVID hit, I was okay. I was doing all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So listen to your guidance and
yeah.
you'll be all right.
In terms of listening to your guidance, this is just one last question I wanted to ask you. Do you receive it as a download? Do you hear the voices? How do you receive your information?
It happens differently at different times. It can be an instant knowing. You just kind of get a know. Oh, I've got to shift that. I've got to do that. I don't know what. It just came instantly. It can be a gentle voice. It can be a sign from the universe, like a book. Actually, a friend of mine, that literally a book fell off a shelf and hit her on the head, and it changed her life. She shifted her whole work because of that book and because of the author. She went and trained with that author.
Wow.
It can be feelings. The more connected with the body we are, the better, because our intuition often works through the body, through feelings. So the more disconnected from the body, the harder the higher self has to work to get through to us. It can be a flash in the mind. The higher self can speak directly to the mind, but often it speaks directly to the body and the feelings first. So trust your feelings, as they say in Star Wars.
Absolutely.
Luke, trust your feelings.
Very interesting. It's you're a very inspiring human being, and the courage that you showed, and the confidence and the self-esteem that you've developed through all the work you've done is palpable. And so I want to thank you for joining me and sharing your world and your inspiration.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me. It's lovely talking to you.
Yeah, same here.